Hello, everybody. In today's video, we will be talking about what the meaning of architecture is through our selected architect's eyes, Joseph Paxton. But to start off with, who is our architect? Where is he from? Joseph Paxton was born in England in 1801 and lived through the Federal, Victorian, and Industrial era. Even though he was not a formally trained architect, he was a renowned gardener, engineer, and entrepreneur. Paxton represents a pivotal shift. His design thinking wasn't about applying art to a building, it was about using the tools of the industrial age to solve problems in a revolutionary way. He designed buildings using innovative construction techniques and prefabricated components to create massive, intricate structures. And his engineering skills were recognized in his most famous work, the Crystal Palace, that emerged during the Industrial Revolution, a period defined by new technologies and materials like cast iron and sheet glass. This project will be our main focus for today. From Joseph Paxton's perspective, the meaning of architecture is the logical process of designing an efficient, scalable system to solve a practical problem, where the beauty of the building emerges directly from the honesty of its industrial materials and methods of construction. Now that we have introduced Paxton's perspective on the meaning of architecture, let's move on to his philosophies. This can be broken down into three core principles. 1. Function over form. 2. Architecture as a system. And 3. Structural honesty. Starting with function over form, Paxton's primary concern was solving the practical problem at hand. For the Crystal Palace, the need was for a massive, cheap, and quickly assembled exhibition hall. His design was altogether subordinate to the uses of the building, and he didn't start with a historical style, he started with the functional requirements. Now we move on to architecture as a system. This is the key to understanding the term modular. Instead of designing a singular handcrafted object, Paxton designed an apparatus of mass-produced interchangeable parts that could be assembled rapidly on site, such as iron girders, wooden frames, and glass panes. Guisela states in his book Architecture in the 20th Century that Paxton designed a system for building based on a 24 times foot module and rational prefabrication. And lastly, structural honesty. Paxton saw no need to hide the building's skeleton. He believed the engineering itself contained a new kind of beauty. Paxton's structure is the architecture. The aesthetic wasn't applied later. It emerged from the logic and rhythm of the exposed iron grid and the transparency of the glass. Having Paxton's definition of architecture and his philosophy in mind, we will now introduce the project in which Paxton's design thinking is best shown, the Crystal Palace. The Crystal Palace showcases industrial prowess through Joseph Paxton's innovative solution, which was a triumph of functionality that emerged from a practical need to quickly, affordably, and efficiently house the Great Exhibition of 1851, a celebration of industry in London, a modular, demountable structure crafted from mass-produced interchangeable components. This was not architecture as art, but rather architecture as an intelligent, scalable solution. His design prioritized the building's utility, a focus that revolutionized the very perception of architecture and shattered conventional practices. As Curtis noted in page 37 of his revised version of the book Modern Architecture since 1900, the design was altogether subordinate to the uses of the building. Exhibition halls prior to 1851 were typically solid, imposing structures, reflecting the prevailing neoclassical and historical revival styles of the 19th century. Temporary pavilions, like the one erected for the 1844 French Industrial Exposition in Paris, were vast but conventional. Illustrations from the time depict a large hall with a timber or perhaps cast iron truss roof, but with solid opaque walls punctuated by windows. These buildings, though often grand in scale, were essentially temporary versions of permanent structures, relying on traditional materials like wood, plaster, and stone, and requiring significant time for construction and dismantling. Even as early as the 17th century, large-scale public buildings were defined by classical design and permanence. Another great example is the Covent Garden Market, designed by Inigo Jones in 1630. A monumental planned piazza constructed from traditional materials like brick and stone. Unlike the adaptable, demountable nature of the Crystal Palace, the Covent Garden project was an exercise in urban planning intended for enduring use. The distinction lies in their very purpose. One was a static, permanent feature of the urban landscape, while the other a temporary, portable monument to industrial innovation. The Crystal Palace shattered these conventions. Its revolutionary design was born not from classical architectural training, but from Paxton's experience in designing greenhouses. To better explain and frame Paxton's design thinking, we will break it down into three sections. First up is volume. The palace created immense open internal volume with an unprecedented amount of natural light, whereas conventionally, architecture created volume with heavy, solid mass. Paxton's design approach was to create a building that was almost pure, filled with light-filled space. In page 20 of the same book, Gossel mentions that he used a transparent glass skin to enclose a vast atmospheric interior that felt limitless, an unending perspective where all materiality dissolves. This highlights the sheer scale and transparency, for which were astonishing for its time. It was a structure with an enclosing and vast space without the need for thick, load-bearing walls. Moving on to the second section, structure. The structure was a revolutionary grid of prefabricated cast iron columns, wrought iron trusses, glass, and wood. In choosing these materials, which he had a deep understanding of due to his engineering skill, he rejected monumental masonry, as it wasn't lightweight and clashed with his design thinking of efficiency. As a result, instead of hiding the structure behind a decorative facade, Paxton made the structure the aesthetic. The beauty came from the logic of the grid and the honesty of the mass-produced components produced off-site. The Crystal Palace was then assembled, bolted together on-site, a method that anticipated modern construction techniques. This standardized system allowed for incredibly fast construction. The building was completed in 8 months. And finally, the circulation. Traditional buildings dictated movement through corridors and defined rooms. The Crystal Palace's open floor plan, lack of interior walls, and non-hierarchical grid was designed for the fluid circulation of massive crowds. The lightness of the structure and the transparency of the glass also created a sense of free movement and connection to the outside world. Paxton's logical design process regarding circulation was clear and intuitive, having been organized around the exhibition's display rather than confined by architectural barriers. It was an instrument for viewing and moving, allowing people to flow freely through a single, unified volume, a direct expression of its purpose as an exhibition hall. In comparison to other similar projects, the unveiling of the Crystal Palace for the Great Exhibition marked a dramatic departure from the architectural norms of its time, fundamentally reshaping the concept of exhibition halls. While grand expositions had been held across Europe for decades, the structures that housed them were deeply rooted in traditional design and construction. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, buildings of this scale relied on long-established methods and materials. The last topic we want to talk about are Joseph Paxton's values. Paxton saw building as a network. For him, the industrial system was not something to be contained within tradition, but a force to replace it entirely. He didn't hide his structure, he celebrated it. He understood that the iron frame and glass skin had their own inherent, breathtaking beauty, and that this new setup demanded a completely new kind of building. Overall, Joseph Paxton is known for his innovative use of prefabricated iron and glass, which revolutionized building practices. His architectural thinking was driven by practicality, efficiency, as well as economical. Paxton's values and core principles of his philosophy were a break from tradition, which differed from the conventional approach or the business-as-usual practices of that time. His most famous work, The Crystal Palace, is an excellent example demonstrating that his entire approach was a departure from the traditional, slow, and expensive building method, as well as being fundamentally based on modular principles, making him a pioneer of modular architecture. Having the structure be able to be assembled and disassembled was a concept completely new to architecture. This approach challenged the conventional notion of a building as a permanent, solid monument. Even now, his work is extremely influential and remains significant. He didn't just design a building, he designed a system for building, and in doing so, revealed the path to a truly modern architecture.